Hello and welcome to another edition of your favourite podcast, Insane in the Membrane.
Insane in the Membrane.
Here we are again, it's Thursday. You know what that means? It's time for Insane in the Membrane with your old pal Wilson and producer Paul in the driving seat. Oh yeah, he's over there in the corner there.
I've even got a microphone.
Yeah, he loves this.
Yeah.
I like this with you
lean
chipping in. I like it. This is like the radio show.
Yeah.
It's absolutely brilliant. I like it. I think it keeps it interesting.
Yeah.
With me just prattling on my own. Yeah, we need another voice.
I can prattle too.
Yeah, he can. And he's not fucking around with his boat. Anyway, we do you know what? We here at Insane in the Membrane, we're trying to bring through, interesting people that you might not necessarily have heard of, but people that I've enjoyed talking to. Not just comedians, people from all walks of life. I think that's what makes it more interesting. Because I love comedians, but we don't want to hear us talking about gigs all the time. So it's nice to talk to other people about other things. We've got some great guests coming up in the future from, again, people you might have heard of, people you haven't, but very interesting in their chosen field. And I think it all helps with the conversation regarding how we look after our mental health. That's what we do this podcast for. We might not just necessarily sit and talk specifically about mental health, but the conversations that we're having, hopefully you'll get something from it that will help you keep yours in working order. So that's why we do this, and that's why I do it, and I love to do it. So speaking of people from other walks of life, we got taken up. We went up to London and to go and interview Jamie Davies. Now he's just written a TV show called You and Me, and producer Paul and I went up there to have a chat with him about the show. It was one of the executive producer was Russell T Davies, of all people. And it's a brilliant TV show. Very idea. I think it's been recorded for ITVX. Is that right?
That's right. It's going to be on ITVX.
ITVX, yes.
And you have to watch it there, or you have to wait for ages for it to be on.
Yes.
ITV, the telly.
That's it, the telly.
Yeah.
But he's a brilliant chap. Really fascinating. I really enjoyed talking to him. And when it's someone I don't really know, I'm always a little bit on the back foot and like, right, how is this going to go? Because I'm not a trained interviewer, I'm not Paxman or anyone like that. I'm kind of, figuring it out as I go along. So you worry that, is the conversation going to flow? Is it going to be interesting? Am I going to ask the right questions that keep the conversation, like keeping the plate spinning? And I didn't have to worry about that with Jamie. He's such an easy guy to talk to, and was so open and honest about his own dealings with his own mental health, and it was beautiful. And at the end of it, there was a moment where there was one of his people was sat with us, and we all had a tear in our eye. It was a wonderful moment. Not producer Paul's a robot, but the rest of us.
Glazed over. The lady that was looking after him. Yeah, she was. She'd been listening to him chat all day.
That's it. Was it Alex?
This was.
Is that her name, Alex?
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was the interview
That's it.
that got her, because it wasn't formulaic. Yeah, press jumped her.
That's what it was. I think. Yeah, the rest of the day was all kind of like where'd you get your ideas from? And we just walked in and went,
What's your favourite
Yeah,
colour?
yeah. Whereas we walked in and went, right, let's find out about you. And I think she was at the end. We were all a bit teary-eyed and hugging, and it was a wonderful moment, wasn't it? Nice. So you're going to hear that coming up in a minute. It's Jamie Davies.
A podcast from producer Paul.co.uk.
Insane in the Membrane.
So there's no big introduction. We just start chatting. That's it. So you started at 11 today with these, and then what time are you going to be finishing later on? Do you know? Just whenever.
Well, I think I've been lied to several times by now.
Yeah.
I think we'll be done by like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, something like that. Yeah.
Have you done one of these before?
I have, yeah. So not. This is the first one that we've done for You and Me, and then also You and Me is the first. It's the first thing that I wrote. It's the first thing I've ever done for anything that I've written before. But I've done them before when I was acting and things.
Yeah. How do you feel about being like sort of behind the camera this time?
I mean, like, it's what I always wanted to do. So I think when I'm from a little mining town in West Yorkshire called Pontefract, and I moved from there to London to go to drama school. And I came out of drama school and I wanted to be an actor, and I was one of the lucky ones, and I started work straight away, and I got to work at the RSC and the National and on TV, and all these things I always wanted to do. But what I knew I always wanted to do was write.
Okay.
And for a lot of reasons, I think imposter syndrome being chief amongst them, I didn't. And because I didn't think I went to the right school or had the right credentials or any of those things. But I decided that if I didn't do it now, I was never going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that was what made me write the show and then send it to Russell. And I think everything that's happened since then has been like a dream come true.
Yeah. I think it's that fear of rejection, isn't it? It's that, it's just, you know, because in our industry, be you a performer, writer, whatever, it's to keep having to push yourself through the rejections.
I think it is, but I also think it's the fear of not being able to do it. Do you know what I mean? That there was definitely kind of a part of me where, because I worked in the industry as an actor and I'd always thought that I wanted to write, then you don't know that you can. And I think what was important to me was, like, I'd worked with writers before, and I'd devised things, and things had been on TV, and I just thought, I came up with that, or I wrote that. But I did not think then, nor do I think now, that is writing. There was a chasm of difference between that and writing something. So what I had to do, I felt, was go away and write something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Because then and only then would I know if I could actually do it. Like, can you actually do it? Or have you just read a few William Goldman books and you can criticise other people's work? Do you know what I mean? Because we all know those people. And I think that was it for me. So I went away and I wrote it. And by the end of it, I had to decide, like you say, make that leap of faith and decide what you were going to do. So I thought, if I could send it to anybody, who would I send it to? And I thought, Russell T Davies, because I think he's the best. Now, I worked with Russell as an actor 9 years earlier. I'd bumped into him in a coffee shop once in that time. We had no real relationship. So I remember sending him this email that said, look, I know that it's highly unlikely you'll have the opportunity to read this, but if I don't send it, it's impossible. So I'm going to choose highly unlikely over impossible and send it. So I sent it, and then I remember it was like 2 weeks later. I was on the train. It's Friday night, 5 to 6. I had both kids on my lap, and I thought, I'll check my emails and I'm done for the week. And I got this email from Russell that I will never forget. Like, it's still saved on my phone. And I remember scrolling through it thinking, there's going to be a but. And there wasn't one. And he wrote back and he said, look, we should go for lunch and talk about what you want to do. So we met.
Fantastic.
And we had this sort of 4-hour lunch that he now calls the Summit at Carluccio's, where we talked about everything. We talked about writing, and we talked about what I want to do, and we talked about the show. And he gave it to Dominic Treble-Collins, who's the executive producer at Happy Prince and ITV. Dom read it, was incredible about it, and said, look, we should make it. And then I went away and I worked in it, because it was written originally as a film. Because I said before about a beginning, middle, and end, so I wanted to know if you can actually do it. And then he asked me how I developed that into a TV series. I told him, and then we took it from there. I wrote it, Russell asked to read it, and then Russell said he'd like to be executive producer on it. And all this is happening in months, in like no time at all. So like, from me being in the position I'm in now to getting that email on that train, it was like 2 years ago. And I think that the whole thing has been a dream come true. It's been extraordinary in every way. And I think to have someone like Russell go from being your hero to your mentor to your friend is something I never imagined. And that journey over the last 2 years has been the most incredible one of my life.
I can imagine. It's fantastic. It's the story. It's what everybody wants.
That's what he says. He said that. I mean, one of the things that he talks to me all the time is every time something else incredible happened for me, I'd get these sort of all caps emails going, "This never happens. This is ridiculous," like that. But I'm, for what it's worth, fully aware. Do you mean that that's the case, and how lucky I am, and that I think that, like I say, to have someone like him on your side, and for all of these things to have happened so quickly, for you and me to have happened. To be talking about doing a second one, the stuff that I do right for BBC now, the other stuff that I do for ITV, is a dream come true, and I do not know what I've done to deserve it, because I'm convinced that I don't. Yeah, right. And but it's been incredible.
Does that play on your mind? That kind of, like you mentioned, the imposter syndrome earlier.
Yeah, a lot.
But now you've got, you've had this incredible opportunity. You've got, one of the best in the business saying, yeah, this is it. This is great. And so surely now you must get to a point, or must be getting to a point where you're like, actually, yeah, I can do this.
Simultaneously, yes and no.
Yeah.
I think what happens is what someone like Russell gives you. So when the first time he really went through the script, so we sent him the script for the whole series, and he said, Dom said to me, Russell wants to have a Zoom about the script because he's read it, and I went, oh, that's terrifying. Yeah, let's do it. So Dom and I talked, and we said, I think he's probably going to give us 10 minutes, and he might give us a steer as to you're going down the wrong way, you're going down the right way. So he got on this Zoom and said, I'm saying to me, how do you feel? And I said, terrified, which is true. And then he said, okay, let's begin, page 1. And then we went through every line in every scene all the way through.
Oh, wow.
And at the end, he said that he'd like to executive produce it. And I think what was incredible about that for me was simultaneously he'd get to a point where he'd go, this joke here, do you think this is funny? I don't. It's gone. Like that. And you throw that out and I'm not going to argue back. And then also, but that's incredible because then when he says to you, I don't know, I think this really works, or this really moved me, or I thought this was really nice. That's what heaven feels like. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what makes you think, maybe there is something here, maybe I can do it. What has happened to me since that, I think, is a combination of that, but also an enormous amount of pressure now to produce the next thing, or the next thing, or the next thing. Do you know what I mean? Or even while you're rewriting this the whole time, you don't want to go, oh, well, I'm there now. Do you know what I mean? And I think the position that I'm in now, if before it was, the question I said to you when I left that show and was like, right, now I'm going to write my own thing. Yeah. The real question in the air then was, can you do it? I think the question now is, that went really well, that went ridiculously well. What are you going to do about it? And I think that's a different kind of pressure that I feel now. And I think it's also for me, at the same time that I was writing this, I was part of the BBC Writers Academy, where they take I think thousands of people apply, they say, but they take 8 or 9 writers, and then you work there and you develop a show with the BBC, and then you write for EastEnders and Casualty and Holby, all those things. I was doing all of that at the same time as I was doing this, and that was going really well. And this was going really well. And then ITV was saying to me, are you interested in doing this project for us? And I'm going, yeah, absolutely, anything. And I think now for me, it's about, and it's that same constant pressure that we all put on ourselves to achieve the best thing that you can achieve, to make it the best that it can be every time, all the time. And it's that, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the difference between motivation and drive. Do you know what I mean? That the motivation is the thing that gets you going, but it's that drive that keeps you going through all of that. And I think that's the thing now for me, is to be going, okay, well, I know what I think is going to be next, but it won't be next unless I apply the same kind of commitment, or the same kind of rigor, or the same kind of heart that you did to get yourself into this position in the first place. Because I'm more than aware that currently I have a vanishingly short window where people are interested. That won't last forever. It certainly won't last forever if you don't deliver. So I think that's the place that I'm kind of in now with it. Does that make sense? Yeah, absolutely makes sense. It's like you said, it's a different kind of pressure. I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because you don't want to. The other side of it is you don't want to force it. You don't want to be. You want to the next thing. It needs to be organic. Yeah. Rather than I need something right now. It does. I think that's really true. And I think also but I think where that kind of pressure comes from in a way is that you do it for a living. So you're not a poet sat under a tree waiting for the muse to strike you, and then maybe you'll write something today and maybe you won't. Do you understand? This will have, if they say to you, we'd like you to make a show for us, then they want it to be delivered on time, on budget, in a time frame that you do not get to come up with. Do you know what I mean? That I think that's the thing that you go, and so, and it's equally, you want it to come from the place that this came from, and the other shows that I've written came from that have worked for you. But you also have to be aware that it kind of has to come within that time frame. And I think that's where craft meets talent. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely. And more often than not, one of those things is going to let you down. Do you know what I mean? With me, it's talent. I think that's it. But I think that you're in that position then where you're sat there going, asking yourself that question, what next? As opposed to letting it happen. Do you know what I mean? And being aware that you sometimes have to make it happen.
Yeah, true.
Do you know what I mean?
That's it. Like you say, you don't have that luxury of kind of like, oh, just let it find its way, man.
Yeah, no, but no, absolutely not. But I also think, but the true luxury is being able to do it for a living. Do you mean, because
Yes,
I'm aware that while like I am in any day when I go out to my little office that I have in the garden, I start my morning every day by going out there, no matter what the task is in front of me for that day, filled with gratitude that this is what I do, that my biggest problems currently are I have too much television to write for the time I have available. Do you know what I mean? That my biggest problems are I can't play with my 2 children that I love this Sunday afternoon because I have to go and write a television show. These aren't problems.
Not really.
I mean, these are not problems. These are dreams, not only of other people, but dreams that I had myself 2 years ago. And I think that it's that, for me, that helps me through those 5 a.m. alarm clocks that I'm going downstairs because I know I'm going to work out and then immediately start writing because I don't have enough. I have over-promised and I'm determined not to under-deliver. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's
that. Do you know what I mean? I think it's that, and I think it's that. And you have to find that in yourself because no one's going to do it for you.
No,
do you know
I think it's listen to how you deal with it. That's because you're like I said, like this industry will play havoc with your mental health. I'm a comedian, so I'm always like you mentioned just now. You said about there's always that need to be better and always need to improve and things like that. And I don't think that ever leaves you.
No,
it'll never go. And it's just all that. It's like you've just said. It's that drive. It's the looking around and going, oh, I'm lucky I do this. That actually helps with mental health issues. Do you know what I mean? I
think so.
When I've done jobs before, no disrespect to anybody that does those jobs. I've driven vans and all sorts of things, but the stress because you don't want to be there. You're just doing a job to pay the bills. My
dad said to me really, really on in my career. He said the biggest difference between your job and mine is that everybody at your job has worked really hard to be there in the first place, and by proxy wants to be there. Yeah. Nobody wants to be in my job. Do you know what I mean? So the only real advice that he ever gave me in terms of like life or career, because he never imagined that I would go on and do any of this, was that you don't make your lunch hour the best part of your day. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and I think that my lunch hour is, my work is so enjoyable that I don't bother taking one. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You just kind of shovel it down while you're trying to write a joke. Do you know what I mean? And I think that that is not the worst advice in the world, and I will give it to both of my children. And I think that what is key when, like you say, when you remind yourself that a lot of that pressure you're putting on yourself. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. When you're going out there to do it. And I think that if you start from a place where you are, if you start from that gratitude place, if you start from a place where you are grateful to go that my biggest problems are ones that I've not only brought on myself, but worked really hard to bring on myself, then you'll write from a better place. You will go on stage in a better place. You will write your new set from a better place. You will do a better I believe, anyway. I know that sounds hopelessly romantic, but I'm a hopeless romantic. But I think that do you know what I mean? But I think that that's true. And I think that is one of the tools, I think, to move through a difficult professional period, is knowing that it only is a difficult professional period. You know? I think that's it. And I think that idea of that you can work through it. Yeah. I mean, by literally doing the work. Absolutely. That this will be better, that you will feel better at the end of the day if you've achieved the things that you set out to achieve. Yeah. And do you find it, like you've just said, like every day you go out to your office and you go, right, I've got to do this thing. Because there's some days you're just like, I can't be asked. I can't. Or you just don't have if you're a bit cloudy or whatever and you don't have the motivation. I think that two things. I think habit is important to me. So I think that So I get up every morning and I go downstairs with my 2 children and I do a workout and then I eat. And then I'm invariably in a better mood than I was when I woke up. Do you know what I mean? I've also achieved a few things. And therefore, if I can walk them to school, which is a really short commute, and then come back again, I'm ready to start in a different place to when I woke up. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's really important to me. I think also I'm aware that sometimes you can go for a run and something can come to you. Sometimes you can be sat on a bus and something can come to you. But more often than not,
That's
more
how I
often
do it.
than not. Yeah, more often than not, it will come to you in a different way if you're actually sat there prepared to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't have the time, like you say, to go, I'm just going to walk around London all day and I reckon I'll write 6 great jokes. Do you know what I mean? That you go, or you can go into the office and do the work. And I think that for me, on the days where it's hard for whatever reason, it's about trying to relax. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's about trying to relax and reminding yourself that you're grateful and reminding yourself that you brought this on yourself and reminding yourself that the world won't stop turning if you don't nail this scene, story structure, joke, whatever it is, by a certain time period. I mean, I think that's important. And also, like, when you're trying to achieve a lot in life, like the career that you've chosen is not an easy one to come by. No. Do you know what I mean? And it can be taken away from you really quickly.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
absolutely.
That you aware that it's going to take a certain amount of hard work to get it. I think what's important to me is it's in applying a sort of like sportsman-like attitude to sportsman-like work ethic to an artistic endeavour.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally get it.
Because that's the only way that I think you can achieve, or I personally, listen, other people do it different ways, I can achieve the amount of stuff that I'm trying to do is by going, I need to work really hard at it and be really committed to it in a way that you might be if you were an athletic endeavour. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. And it's, looking back from where I grew up in a small town just outside London, and Pontefract, having been there a couple of times, I imagine it's very similar.
Yeah.
When you look back and don't know disrespect to Pontefract, you're kind of like, wow, I was running around Pontefract.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing this.
Yeah.
That must blow your mind.
And my family's.
Yeah.
I think that none stronger than me. I think it does, and I think you're right. There's absolutely no disrespect to Pontefract, but there's also no point pretending that I didn't want to do this, and there's no point pretending that this isn't a long journey, both in terms of geography and class and all of those things to get here. And I marvel now at the 14-year-old I must have been to go, I know what I'm going to do. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to move to London that I've never been to, and I'm going to write and perform in television. And I do not know to this day where that came from or where that courage came from. I can only presume naivety is what I can think.
Yeah, it's just in you.
You know what I mean? But I think it must have been an element of going, because if anybody had explained to me how hard it was, I would have probably have gone, oh, hang on, I don't know about that. But I think that's the thing about these careers as well, is that I think if anybody ever says to me, what advice would you give somebody who's trying to become a writer or whatever it is, my advice is always don't do it. Because I think if me saying don't do it is enough to make you even think about not doing it, you don't even nearly want to do it in the first place, because it's so hard, it's so difficult, there's so many ups and downs. And I'm aware that I say this from a position of massive privilege and that things have happened really quickly, but I think it's that idea of going, even when it's going really well, it's going to be really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it's finding your way through that, I think.
I think it's growing up in a small town like that. This is not me being arrogant. I just always knew there was more.
Yeah.
I've got friends of mine that still live there and they haven't really moved away, and they look at what I do and just, why did you drive to Carlisle? I'm like, what's really gig work? And then where were you the next day? I go, I was in Manchester. They go, what are you doing? And it's just, they can't get their heads around it. But I just always knew there was more. I think that's like you said, that when you were 14, you were like, no, that's what I want to do. It's.
But I think I knew there was more without knowing what it was.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that make sense? I didn't know. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it wasn't necessarily going to be. But I knew it was out there.
Just
somewhere.
Something.
Do you know what I mean? I think it was always that thing about that I knew that I wanted to try. And I think that when I look at, and I'm thinking this now as I talk to you, when I look at that 14-year-old going, do you know what, Mum? I've got a great plan. Whatever part of me it was that said that must have been the same part of me that thought, I'm going to actually write.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm going to do it all over again. Just when you think you've got to a place where you go, oh, this is fine, actually. Does it mean that you go, well, actually, this isn't what you really want to do. What you really want to do is write. So it must have been a similar part in me that made you go, I'm going to do it all over again. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Just when you think you've got like a family now and all those things, you go, no, I'm going to do it all over again. And I think that in a large part speaks to what the show is about. It's about taking that leap of faith.
Yeah,
because that's
yeah,
all it is. No matter what anybody tells you about talent or hard work or anything, it is a leap of faith.
Yeah.
When you move into an industry that essentially makes no sense. Do you know what I mean?
I know. With
my
my parents now, even my dad's pretty cool. They're both cool, but my mum, every time I see mum and she's like, you're getting paid. You're like, I've been doing it 20 years. Yeah. It's all right, but they can't. Doesn't make, like you say, exactly that. It doesn't make sense. But
does it make sense to you all the time?
No,
exactly not. And I think that's the thing. And I think for me, you have to. One of the things that I was talking about writing a lot is that, like, you will spend. So this is lovely, right? And being on set is lovely, and sitting at a read through of your own show is incredible, and watching things back on TV that you've written is wonderful. But the really great stuff, is when you're walking around your office and you think it's that. That's the punchline. It's that. That's the moment that changes them. It's that. That's how this story. That's the ending. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That, to me, is better than all of those things put together. And the truth is, you spend a lot more time doing that than you do doing anything else. So you have to love the actual work.
Oh,
you can only go to Carlisle and Manchester back to back if you love standing on stage, speaking to an audience. Do you know what I mean? You have to love the work. I think the work is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
And I think that gets me through any of the stuff that I need to go through to get there. I love doing it.
That's it. Like you said earlier, that's what drives you. To keep
and that's
doing
what keeps
it.
going. Do you know what I mean? Like, because I think that's what do they say? Like, without motivation, you won't start. Without consistency, you won't finish. And I think it's the consistency of loving what you do that keeps you literally doing it. I mean, people say, "Why do you do it?" Well, I wouldn't want to do anything else.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm aware that I'm aware how mad it is and all those things.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's not to analyse it too much.
No.
Take it for what it is.
Because you'd just stop doing it. You'd be like that, wouldn't you? You'd be going like, hang on a minute, let me just read this. It's been a nightmare. I'm not doing this anymore. There must be a better way.
How easy was it for the story to come together? Because you've got the three main characters. Yeah. And did it start off that way?
It started off with me. So I wrote this at a time in my life when things were going really well for me. And I sort of catastrophized that and thought, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I thought it would be this, because then you've got a story about whether anybody can ever come back from that. Then you've got a story about whether anybody can ever find love again, because that's what this is. It's a love story, but more than that, it's a story about love. Between a boy and a girl, a parent and a child and a parent, a girl and her sister. And it's about what that love costs you. Because I think all love costs you something, even if it's just a jeopardy, you might lose it. I mean, I met my wife when I was 17.
Oh, really?
And I think, and I'm aware that at any point between that time and this could have gone horribly wrong, and I would have been lost. But we did it anyway. I mean, one of the main character, Ben, says, "I love you, but I can't promise you anything." He knows that because he's promised things to people before and they didn't come true. But you do it anyway. That's the risk you take when you love someone. That's what love is. That's what life is, and that's what this show is. And that's really where it came from. The idea of me thinking, what is the worst thing that could happen to me now? Yeah. And I thought it would be this. Do you know what I mean? I
think talking about love is having been through all manner of relationships, but the last one I went through was heavy, and it finished awful. Like, it was just bodies everywhere. It was carnage, you know. So it really struck me when I was reading about the show. Oh, yeah, man, how do you come back from that? But I did. There was something in me that went, it was a moment I was like, I'm never doing that again. I'm never going to be with anybody else again. I did that whole cliche down, I'm going to go and buy a truck and live in the woods with a dog.
How long that last?
Yeah, like a minute. And then I met my now wife. And but yeah, that moment when everything was so bad, you know, I'm never doing this again. But then there was something that was like, no, you'll be fine. It's not always going to be that. But
that I think is the romanticism. I mean, that's like the romantic with this kind of smaller way. Like, I think with this show, it's a show that asks a really big but a really simple question, which is the power of love worth the risk of heartbreak? Yeah. And we answer it with a resounding yes. And the reason we answer it with a resounding yes, there's a few reasons, but one is that has been my experience. Do you know what I mean? That I think that that love for me, for for my wife, for my children, for my family, has been the driving force in my life. Do you know what I mean? And I think that to put that on screen and go that this is the most powerful thing, do you know what I mean? And be unashamedly, whilst being truthful, like you say, to the pain of that, the romantic aspect of it, and saying it's about how do you move on? Because we were saying it's set across 2 timelines, now and then. So all the characters have to decide is, do they want to live in the now, or do they want to live in the then? Do you want to let the things that happen to you in the past dictate your life, or the things that you do in the present? We were talking before, there's a Edward Vance Wood poem that I love, where he says, the trouble's a ton, or the trouble's an ounce, or the trouble's what you make it. It isn't the fact that you're hurt that counts. What counts is how did you take it? Meaning that it's what you do that will dictate your life. What are you actually going to do about it? Because how you feel is important, and what happened to you is important, but blame and reasons why don't mean anything and won't get you anywhere. What are you actually going to do about it? And the question that both of our leads in this show are asked by other people, and then eventually at the end ask themselves, is what are you going to do? Because what you do next will affect the rest of your life. And I think that happens to be true. Do you know what I mean? And I think it comes, that is admittedly a romantic notion, but I think it comes from a place of truth. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you have to go through all of that shit to get to that point where you suddenly, you have that. I remember I did it myself. I remember it was the end of the lockdowns. I was staying at my friend's house in Stratford. I'd spend a lot of my time just walking through Hackney Wick and through Victoria Park with my headphones in, just walking round and round and round and round and round for days, and just like reading a book and just trying, just like kind of like going through the debris. And then one day it was like, right, well, you can't keep doing this. What's next? What do we do next?
Stasis or change.
Yeah.
Stasis or change. It's always that. I think it's like when you're, like any film that we all love, any story that we all love, there is a moment where the character has to decide, be they Hamlet or Luke Skywalker or Ben in this, do you want stasis or do you want to change? Do you want to be a farm boy or do you want to be a Jedi? Because if you want to be a Jedi, you're going to have to do something about it. You know what I mean? Hamlet, what do you want to be? Do you want to take this kingdom back, or do you just want to let him have it? Because if you want to take it back, you have to do something about it. And that is the same thing that you're doing when you're walking around the park. They're going, do you want to walk around this park for 10 years, or do you want to walk around this park for 10 more minutes and then go, right, I'm going to slowly start to piece it all back together. And if I'm really lucky, I might build something better.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? And I think that is what these characters do, because I think that is what we all do at some point, whether we talk about it or not, whether we're even aware of it or not. We've all had those moments where you sort of go, I can't keep living in the past in this way. I can't keep thinking about something that has already happened to me and I have no effect over now. Because the whole time that I'm doing that, I'm missing out on a life that I could be living. Do you know what I mean?
So true.
And I think what you're doing then is, you're in a show like this, you're just taking that pain and you're, for me, extrapolating it and exaggerating it across what you think what could be the worst possible thing for them to happen. Which is difficult to write then, do you know what I mean? Because you're also, whilst this is a really personal show, it's not autobiographical.
No.
This thing didn't happen. So I think that you have to be aware of that when you're putting it together, because people are going to watch it that thing did happen to.
They are going to.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that you owe any audience, but certainly that audience, an authenticity in how you put it together. Because I think everybody's pain is unique. I mean, everybody feels pain in a different way. So it's about finding it for yourself, about finding where you felt it before, and then seeing it in other people, and then imagining what it would be like for these characters. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's how you come to it. And then you're also doing it in a show where we always said, like, it's got this, because of the backwards and forwards element of that timeline, you're trying to keep the audience guessing as to what happens next all the whole time. So there's like an E.M. Forster quote that I love where he says, stories live and die on the same merit, which is, does the reader care what happens next? Because if they do, you've got a story, and if they don't, you really don't. So I think you're trying to do that, and then you're also trying to hopefully make people laugh as well. Do you mean, and so whenever I think about how do you balance that lightness and that darkness, I think the answer is that you just tell the truth. Do you mean, because we've all had moments in our life of tragedy, and we've all had moments in our life of hilarity, and sometimes they've happened in the same day or the same week. Do you know what I mean? And I think if you tell the truth both times, you'll be fine. rather than you trying to write tragedy and a comedy. Do you know what I mean? I think that's always been key to me, is that you keep it authentic to yourself the whole time, and then hopefully by that it'll be authentic to an audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were writing the characters, because having spoken to writers before, and they were saying like they know when the character's going in the right direction because they actually become real, and and you'll be writing something for that character, and you'll go, no, actually, no, Ben wouldn't do that. That's not what Ben's about. Do you find that? Is it?
Well, yeah, and it's annoying because sometimes it would be really convenient plot-wise for him to do it. And I think that I often have moments where I go, what if Ben just comes in now with a little bit of plot? That'd be great.
Just come in.
Just pause the story while I explain what's going to happen next. Yeah, but you have to, but that's rigor. And that's drive. That's what we talked about earlier. Because again, the danger for me when things are going well is that you go, that's fine. That's a turning point. That's a crisis point. Would you know what I mean? You go, that's fine. And I think that is the real gift, I think, of like Russell's mentorship to me, is that even when he's not on the Zoom, he's in the room. He's like on my shoulder when I'm writing something. I can hear him going, coincidence. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a coincidence. He's just come through with a bit of plot. That's just exposition. So that's all the easy stuff. The really hard stuff is then going, what would I do? Do you know what I mean? Okay. So the simplest thing that you go in like, if this did happen to me, what would I do? The good thing and the bad thing. Do you know what I mean? And I think that it's about staying truthful to that sometimes. Now, whilst I'm not Ben, I'm not Emma, I'm not Jess, I'm not those people, but you are trying to inhabit that character through yourself because they're all part of you. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That I think that any of these people, any things they do are versions of yourself and always will be, or they're versions of my wife. Do you know what I mean? Or their version, or the people, the children are the versions of my children. That because you couldn't, I couldn't write a child and not have some of my children in them. Do you know what I mean? Because that's your direct touch. And the same thing with Lucy, and the same thing when you're writing about yourself. Do you know what I mean? That you go, this is, these three people are my favourite people in the world. Do you know what I mean? So why would you not want to do that in some way? Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense.
Because I'm essentially writing it, and everything I write, I'm writing for them. Do you know what I mean? Everything I'm writing about them in some way. Yeah. And I think it's that. And then you're reminded at the end of the day when you sort of press send, think, oh, they'll read it. Do you know what I mean? You go,
oh no,
I'm glad I've been nice. And I think it's that. But I think that, and that's not easy either. Do you know what I mean? Where you're trying to go like, you are coming from a place of enormous hubris when you say, this is what I think about love. Yeah. And then say, I want millions of people to watch it. Do you know, this is what I think about parenting, and then let other people decide. Do you know what I mean? And I can't think about that when I'm writing it, because that would blow your mind. Do you know what I mean? And my mind is, I've got a lot on, mate. Do you know what I mean? I ain't got time for that. Do you know what I mean? I've got time to actually stare at the reality of my own life. That'd be a nightmare. But I think that you're aware of it after the event, and I think you're aware of it while you're doing it, because you know when you're not doing it. You know when you're writing a pretend person is the key. Do you know what I mean? You know when you're writing something that this person only exists on television. And I think what's always interesting for me is if I can find a moment, a character, a background, a scene even, that you think, I know this to be true from real life because I've seen it and I've never seen it on television. I immediately want to put it on television because that's authentic to me. Do you mean that you go, you've never seen this on TV, but I know it to be true. I know it to be true. So when our children were born, I remember being in that room when they pulled the curtain open and Lucy on the bed and okay, we're going to begin. It was a C-section. And going, I've never seen this on television. No. This is one of the most dramatic things I've ever witnessed in my life. And do you know what I mean? Sat there going, this is mad. In 2 minutes, I'm going to be a father. Do you know what I mean? That you go, this is crazy. And I think that those are the moments where you, and a million tiny moments like that, where you go, you want to represent it in a way that you care about. Because I think when, I'd be interested to know how you feel about this, about when you're going on stage, but when I'm in the position of privilege that I am, where people are asking me to write television programs, I want it to be about things that matter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
And I think that love matters. I think family matters, friendship matters, children matter, parenting matters, all those things. And then if you do all of that, then hopefully you're putting together a piece of work, whether it's your set or whether it's a book or a play or a poem or a song or a TV show where you go, I think that matters. And I think I can stand by it when other people watch it. Saying that is some of my experience, that is some of my point of view.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
There's an old Gallagher lyric, going back to what you said about love a little bit earlier. And he says, like, you've got to be strong enough to love. Yeah. And it's really, you really have to sort of give yourself over to it.
I mean, I agree with him 100%.
Yeah.
And I think that it takes courage, I think, to put yourself in that position, to be in love. So I was really, really young when I met Lucy. And I remember having a conversation with, I can't remember if it was with a friend or with myself, but I think it was about going like, I think if you go any deeper into this, then if it goes wrong, you're going to be really, really in trouble. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But then being aware at the same time, that point was ages ago. Do you know what I mean? Going like, I'm already fucked anyway, so I may as well carry on. So I don't know who I'm kidding. I'm on the precipice of something. Yeah, it is. And I think you're Macbeth then, you're too far steeped in blood. And I think that you, the moment to continue, I think it's two things. It's one, it's being brave enough to do that. And I think also being aware that sometimes you have no say over it.
That's
that
true.
You don't get to decide whether you are or are not in love. All you get to decide, which we keep coming back to over and over again in this chat, is like, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because are you going to let the fact that you are 18 and living in London and you're at drama school stop you doing this? Or are you going to go, well, I think this is a risk. I think the potential success of this is worth the risk of the potential failure. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
And I think that that takes all three of my favourite things: courage, naivety, and stupidity. Do you know what I mean? And I think those things combined will take you a long way.
Oh my God, all those things.
Yeah, I've met in abundance. And I think that, but I think you're right. I think that Noel Gallagher quote's right. And I think that, as in most Noel Gallagher quotes, but I think that you hit the nail on the head when you go, it won't happen for you for nothing. Because even if you fall in love, then you can ruin it very easily.
Oh God, yeah.
Do you mean you can ruin it very easily by not being any of those things? And I think it's about, in this, for example, it's about a story about somebody growing up. That we meet someone when they're 22, and then by the time we leave them, they're 27. And I think that nothing makes you grow up like falling in love.
Oh,
because I think when you fall, because I think it makes you immediately selfless for the first time. Do you know what I mean? That you care about this person more than you care about yourself, and then times that by infinity when you have a child. And then another child, and that's the arc that this character goes on. Do you know what I mean?
That love for your child. I remember when my first was born, and people had talked about unconditional love and just a feeling like no other, and just holding him, and I just thought I was going to burst. It was like nothing else I'd ever experienced. And I'm so glad I got to experience it. And the same when the second one came out. You know, you kind of like. I thought it would be, because it's, you know, I've done that before, you know, no disrespect, I love them both dearly, but you kind of go, yeah, you know, but it was just as strong. You know, this tiny person.
I remember, so we talk about naivety and stupidity, thinking that I was very well prepared. I was thinking, I've got this, I know what I'm doing, I've set this life up, do you know what I mean? And I think that, I'd read all the books, we'd bought all the shit, do you know what I mean? I was on top of all of it.
Yeah, that's it.
And, but the emotional intensity of holding him for the first time, I burst into tears.
Same.
And I didn't know why. And I couldn't put my finger on these tears of happiness or these tears. It was almost like shock. So, I mean, that it was like such an emotionally charged experience to hold him that I remember only concentrating on not dropping him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because everything else around me seemed to be breaking down. And people say to me, are you all right? Are you all right? I'm thinking, look after my wife, I'll be fine. Do you know what I mean?
They just seem so fragile.
Yeah, because they are fragile. Do you know what I mean? And also that love is, that strong as that love is, that life is fragile and you can ruin that. Do you know what I mean? And I think that I agree with that, the intensity of that moment, I think is something that I'll never forget. And I think that's something that again, you think about, when have I ever seen that on television? Because I know friends who've had that experience. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So is there a way of finding that on the TV, in a script? Do you know what I mean? In a set, whatever
this
it is.
It, and it's going back to the script. It's that, like you say, the characters have been through some extreme trauma, and then like you say, it's like, what are you going to do about it? Is that are they made that decision? Like, am I going to let that affect going forward, or am I going to go, right, no, that was then, this is now, I'm going to start again?
But that's the journey. I think that everybody has to go on, because I don't think anybody goes immediately, get up, get over it, turn the page.
No.
Do you know what I mean? You can say that, and you can have that poster up in your room, and you can listen to that motivational clip on YouTube, and good luck with it. But you're not, do you know what I mean? Like that you are going to have to find your own way through it. And you will end up, inevitably, because we always end up this way, going, I need to move on.
Yes.
Is the first step. Actually moving on is much more difficult than that.
This
I think,
is it, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That you think, I know what I want to do. Wonderful, so does everybody. Do you know what I mean? What are you going to do
How
about
are you going to
it?
get to
How
that
are you
point?
going to do it?
Yeah.
How are you going to do it? Do you know what I mean?
We'll line up a little bit. Living in Pontefract, did you ever go to the haunted house?
No, I didn't. Somebody was talking about this recently. They made there's like a YouTube thing about it or something, but I never went. Did you ever go there?
No. I've got friends that have. They do another podcast called The Parapod. So there's one of the guys, Barry Dodds, and he comes with all the stories and he believes it all. He's got all the equipment, goes hunting the equipment. And then you've got Ian Boldsworth, who's the other guy that just debunks the lot all the time. It takes great pleasure just shitting all over Barry's dreams. And they went to the house and spent the night.
In Pontefract?
Yeah, which you can do apparently.
You can. It's a funny place because it's like, I think, was it Richard II maybe? No, someone called it the Key to the North. Do you know what I mean? And it's a kind of, it's a really interesting place to come from. And I think it's even more so living in the world that I live in now, is that I think it's a wonderful grounding for me to ever go home, or that 14-year-old there is still absolutely alive in me, and is the first person that kind of calls me now on all of the nonsense. This really isn't a problem.
But it's again, it goes back to what we were saying about there's that something in you that just, there's more, I know there's more. And it wasn't that I didn't have any love for the town I grew up in. It was just this isn't big enough. There's something else. Yeah. So I was always heading into London to see bands and things like that. There was always something. And I remember saying to a friend of mine, I was delivering bedroom furniture. That was my job at the time, and I was taking some stuff to his place in Kennington. And we're driving over Blackheath, and I said, I'm gonna be someone. And he went, what do you mean, like Nelson Mandela? And I went, no, just I don't know. I'm gonna do something that's not this. And he went, what? I went, I don't know. Yeah, it's just something. I ended up being a comedian, and then doing this, and it's the same.
That can be a curse, though. I think that early ambition it can go both ways. That do you know what I mean? Because I'm also aware that things have worked out brilliantly. Thank you very much. I mean, but if they hadn't have done, then that's really hard for you. And how long do you keep doing the same thing, or when do you change? Do you mean that kind of thing?
As you said, it's all very well wanting to do something, but can you do it? Yeah. And there's people I know that. And I feel for them. They want to be comedians, but they just haven't got it. And it just breaks my heart when I think so. Them.
And I think that's for me. I think that I remember coming down when I first moved to London. I remember saying, "I'm not going to go home for 14 weeks." Right. So do you know what I mean? So I remember a lot of people were like, first weekend, back to mum and dad's in Hampshire or whatever. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But I was thinking, I'm going to stay, because if I stay, then I feel like I'll know it. And you almost go in a place where it was such a bold choice for me to leave Pontefract and go to London that I almost allowed myself no way back. Does that make sense to me? I was thinking I was almost giving myself no choice, going like, it has to be this. Now look, if it hadn't have worked out, hopefully you would have found, like you would have found something else in a different way. But that determination, I think, to go, no, this absolutely has to work. And then be aware that any success you've had since then has every single bit of it's come with a slice of luck that you have to be grateful for.
Yeah. Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? That when people talk about luck is the residue of design, fine, but it exists. Do you know what I mean? That like if we'll talk about this show, if I send Russell that email and he happens to be too busy to read it that week, and then it gets lost in a load of other emails and he never gets round to it, maybe we're sat here now, maybe we're not, we're probably not. And I'm aware of that. Do you know what I mean? That so that you have to be, and that's gratitude again, isn't it?
True.
That's you sort of going, then if anything bad does happen, then that you feel unlucky or you feel unjustly treated or any of those things. Do you know what I mean? That you go, well, you've had breaks as well.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? And I think it's looking always for me for equilibrium.
Yeah.
To keep going.
I think it does come down to your outlook on how you just see the world, because there are people I know that were just like, well, I'm not even going to attempt that because it's not going to work, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Whereas you obviously have that in you to go, like you said, what's the worst that can happen? It's either going to be this or this.
Yeah, well, it could be really bad. I could have gone to London and it'd been a nightmare. But I could have sent it to Russell and he'd gone, this is the worst thing I've ever written. Never email me again. But I think that, I'm sure that email's coming. But I think that that speaks to that kind of romanticism. And romanticism is a dangerous thing. Do you know what I mean? There's, you know that Teddy Roosevelt speech, The Man in the Arena, where he starts it by saying the poorest way to face life is to face it with a sneer. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't do that. And not through any concerted effort, but I can't. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm always set slightly towards the romantic, do you know what I mean? And that gets you in trouble sometimes because you think, no, I can definitely do this. Do you know what I mean?
I'm very much a kind of, I didn't realise I was that way, but obviously I am, because that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing. I just kind of, I did that. I didn't set out to be a comedian. I was kind of, I loved comedy. I could pull a pint, so I ended up working in a comedy club. And then comedians would come through and I'm like, we've actually been talking to you, Rich, and I reckon you could do this.
So when did you first think I can do this?
When I was 30.
30.
So growing up, it wasn't, it was that classic thing of wanting to be in bands and things like that. And then I had kids really young, so I was just sort of like doing that. So it wasn't until later on, and I just thought, and it was that. It was like, yeah, go on then, I can do that. But obviously, subconsciously growing up, I was always making people laugh, not necessarily at school, but friends. And I could always do that. And so obviously, on a level somewhere buried deep, I was obviously preparing for it.
But I think as well, it's that thing, isn't it, where you go, I don't know, let's say you want to be a stand-up comedian, then you might watch, I don't know, take your pick, Chris Rock at Hammersmith Apollo, 2,000 people, and go, oh, I could never do that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? But then you might watch someone do a gig for 500 people and think, oh no, they're amazing, I could never do that. Then you might watch someone in a comedy store and really rip up 10 minutes and think like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. Then you might, but one of those things, you might go, oh, I think I could do that. Yeah. And if I could do that, if I could do type 10, do you know what I mean? Then maybe I could do 20. And if I could do 20, maybe then I could do 400 people, and then and I think it's from there, isn't it, that you go, and then I think there are some people, I'm not one of them, who look at Chris Rock at Hammersmith Apollo and go, yeah, I'd do that, that'd be great, I'd be brilliant at that.
There's an element.
But I think that's, for me, because I think writing's a lot safer than, because I'm not doing it live in front of everybody like you are, but I think that at what point did you see something on TV and go, you watch, I don't know, an Alan Bennett play, an Aaron Sorkin film, a Russell T Davies TV show, and think, a Charles Dickens, I'm going to think, oh my God, I could never do that. Yeah. But then you maybe watch something and think, oh, I think I could do that. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe you do think that goal seems so extraordinary to me, to have a show on TV about things that really matter to you, as unlikely as it seems. Yeah. It feels like it's worth pursuing. It's back to that original email to Russell where I say, look, I know this is unlikely, but if I don't do it, it's impossible. So I'm going to choose unlikely over impossible and have a go. So that email I sent to Russell is essentially me at 14 in Pontefract. It's you deciding to be stand-up comedian. You go, I'm aware it's unlikely, but if I don't ever stand on stage and hold a microphone, it is by definition impossible. So I'm going to choose unlikely over impossible and see where that takes me. And it took you to hear and it took me to hear.
True.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, very true. Do you feel now that you've studied writing and you're writing things yourself now, has that ruined film and television for you? Like when you're watching it?
No, I know you get this a lot. It makes it better. So, like, we talk about structure a lot in storytelling, and structure for me is simply the control of suspense.
Yeah.
That's all it is to me. And I think that when you're watching things then on television, rather than me watching it thinking, that's the turning point, if he starts off as a coward, he's going to end up courageous. Rather than that, you're watching the ones that really work, and you're going, that's really clever how you've done that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's really
still within the framework.
Within the framework, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The most beautiful part of the picture is the frame. And that you're going that within that, you've still managed to surprise me. Or sometimes you've given me exactly what I wanted, when I wanted it, and there's no shame in that either. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think that. So I think for me, it makes you a diagnostician of film and television, of story really, because that's all this is. What you're doing on stage, what I'm doing, it's just
story.
The poet under the thing. If it's a narrative, it's all story. And I think that I'm fascinated by how story works. I think so. When I can watch any film, any TV show, and be interested in how they're putting it together. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's where you start off with everything. Like you can have that moment of inspiration where you might go, I'm going to write a show about two people who do a podcast, right? And you go, great. But before you get interested in that character or any of that, you go, what happens?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That and how are you going to make it happen? And how do they learn? And how do they change? And what's the story really about? All those big things. Do you know what I mean? That when I'm putting together this show or anything new, you have that moment of inspiration, which for this was, what's the worst thing that could happen? For the new show, it's a new thing. But then you're going, okay, let me now break down what this journey is going to be. Because if you break that down, you're breaking down the story. So I think, I think it's like anything, like the more information you have, the more enjoyment you have, I think a lot of times.
And what I love about writing is, because there's a friend of mine that was doing some stuff, and then it wasn't just a case of just sitting down and writing dialogue. She was like, no, you have to create the world that they're living in. It's like, how do these people know each other? Why do they know each other? Like, what's the point? And it was really fascinating. It must be the same. You like create this whole world.
Yeah, you have to. And I think that when you do all the hard work first, really. Do you know what I mean? Because the really fun stuff is writing the dialogue. But the really hard, the really deep digging is story. Like, what is the story? The rest of it is the fun stuff. But you go, what is the story? What do they want? Where are they going? What's standing in the way? Do you know what I mean? Like, I worship at the altar of obstacle and objective. Do you know what I mean? What do they want? What's standing in their way? What have they get over to get it? Brilliant. Work out that, you've got a story. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know, what would be a good example of this? Romeo and Juliet and Star Wars at the same time. So what's Luke Skywalker's flaw? It's essentially cowardice. Do you know what I mean? That you're just at home, isn't going to change, isn't going to do anything. And then, so you pick the least likely person in the world, this farm boy who doesn't ever do anything, to defeat the Empire. It's the same with Romeo and Juliet. It's all those things. Do you know what I mean? Then when you putting those building blocks together, I think is really hard and really, really fun though. And then watching other people do it. So you're watching It's a Sin, for example, and you're saying, wow, look how he's done that in a way that you didn't expect. So I think when I'm putting these shows together, you want to keep the audience guessing in a show like this, not only what happens next, but how it happens next. Because we're not necessarily going to tell the story the way you expect it to be told. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Because there was a bit in this thing that we were doing, and there was a lot of interaction with the neighbour, and then we were like, but why? Why are they? Because you don't have to.
Yeah.
Why? What is making them? What's the connection? And it turned out that they were renting the place off of this person's mum. Which is why they were connected and had. Because if it's just your neighbour, you're never going to. But
it gets more interesting then. But also, because then you're also avoiding that thing of someone's now going to come through with a joke for no reason. Someone's going to come through with a bit of plot for no reason. I mean, someone's going to come up with a line that my mum said once that made me laugh for no reason. And I think it's that. And I think what you're trying to eliminate all the time is coincidence. Do you know what I mean? You're always trying to keep everything really tight. And I'm saying this to a comedian who knows this more than me, because comedy's economy, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? But you think that you're keeping everything really tight and really truthful, and always driving that story forward. Otherwise, you do end up writing a poem in the middle of a TV show, because you just sort of think, I've always thought this about my mum. And then they talk about that for a page. Great. That'll come out. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's interesting to me. Because I think but simultaneously what you are trying to do is like look for authentic examples that you haven't seen on TV. We talked about before about relationships. But it's a way of finding that. What's the Trojan horse that gets that on TV?
Yeah.
How do you get, because you say, I really am interested in my relationship with my mum. Nothing wrong with that. But how are you going to turn it into a story? Do you know what I mean? Otherwise it is genuinely a poem. Do you know what I mean? About this, my mum and I. Let's do it together. My mum and I. But that's it. And how do you find it into a story? And I think that's because when you'll remember, and all the films that you love, that we've taught, and all the plays and all those, you'll remember the story long after you've forgotten the joke that you're desperate to get in. Do you know what I mean?
And it is funny when a character walks in and just explains a big plot.
You feel it. Come here, you go.
Who speaks like that?
And I think, but you also but you'd be amazed how many people that can get by. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's about, again, what we said before about, for you on stage, for me in the office, that rigour of not going, it saved me 2 pages now. If Mark just came in and explained the battle is over, or something like that, do you know what I mean? And I think that it's trying to avoid that. And I think that is, like in life, I think like in your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your children, is quality control constantly. Do you know what I mean? That you're constantly looking for that quality control. I mean, I was talking about this the other day with Lucy. I was saying how, like, you, when you have children, you be the parent you want them to become. You be the adult you want them to become all the time, which is terrifying, because you're then essentially in a fly on the documentary series about your own fucking life every day. Do you know what I mean? And I think that but that's what you're doing when you're working, because you're going, like, if you go out to walk around the park and try and come up with some things for a set, and you go, oh, that'll do. It's only you on stage doing it when no one's like,
true.
It's only you on stage doing it. It's like, there's only my name on these things that I'm sending to Russell. That means if I go, that's fine. He'll come back and say, it's fine. I'm not doing it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that if he wouldn't say that, it'd be much more harsh. But I think that thing that I was saying to you about children is applicable to work, is applicable to all those things. Do you know what I mean? That you're going, it's that quality control about going, who do you want to be as a person? Who do you want to be as a comedian? Who do you want to be as a writer? Who do you want to be as a podcaster? Who do you want to be as a father? Do you know what I mean? And it's and again, I know this is really romantic, I've just said 20 times now, but the more rigour you apply to that, the harder it is, but the better the payoff will be. Because you'll be happier, I think. And that's the goal, isn't it?
Absolutely.
To make yourself and the people around you happy. That's what I'm trying to do with this TV show, with my family, with all those things that you want to, like, I was saying to you before about the poorest way to face life is to face it with a sneer. Like my heroes, so whether you are Shakespeare or Dickens or Aaron Sorkin or Alan Bennett or Russell T Davies, that they don't do that. I mean, that they write things that lighten the burden of mankind and put joy in people's hearts and into the world and all those things. And you go, well, then I am in my own considerably less talented, vanishingly microscopic way trying to emulate some of that. Do you know what I mean? And go like, well, that's what moves me, so I want to try and do that. Do you understand what I mean? And then you go, and then so maybe if you try to do that in your work, then you can maybe try and do that in your life. And if you try and do both those things, you're going to be better off than if you are cynical in your relationships, or you are cynical in your work, or any of those things. And people do that, do you know what I mean? But it's not, it isn't something that I do, because for no other reason than I don't think I could. Do you know what I mean? It's too hopelessly romantic.
And that's a perfect way to finish.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. It's been really interesting. It's been lovely to meet you.